All right, the meeting will come to order. Welcome. Good evening. My name is Stephen. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the co-chairs of Houston DSA. Welcome to our general meeting for January. Um, we do have a lot to get through tonight, so I'll keep things moving. First of all, we begin with a land acknowledgement. We honor the indigenous peoples of the Houston area and call for land back for the Karankawa, the Quilatecan, the Atakapa, Ishak, and Sana peoples. And you can visit native-land.ca to see a map of indigenous peoples' lands and learn more about our area. So also we begin our meetings with community agreements. So if you're going to speak either here in person or on Zoom, just make sure to introduce yourself, say your name and pronouns before you speak. Be respectful of one another's pronouns. Take care of yourself if you need to step away to use the restroom or go outside to get some air. Again, there are food and drinks here in the back for those here in attendance. Take space and make space. When we're having discussion, debate, just making sure that you're making space for others to contribute and to give their thoughts, give their perspectives. We want to be respectful of speakers when they are speaking, when we go into our breakout sessions later in the meeting. See something, say something, just in terms of making sure this is a welcoming and inclusive space. Use I statements, own your impact when you're giving a opinion or perspective, making sure that you're making clear that you're only speaking for yourself and you're not giving the definitive or final answer. Accept non-closure. Of course, we're not going to resolve every debate or disagreement that might exist tonight. Jargon giraffe. If there is a question or term that you are unclear about, you can raise your hand to have that resolved. And then for those joining on Zoom, you can type stack jargon in the chat to have that question answered. And then just for general questions or comments, type stack in the chat or raise your hand to be recognized and called upon. And then finally, no entryism for outside organizations or other groups or organizations. This is a meeting for Houston DSA. Okay. We also, again, want to make clear the chapter's harassment and grievance policy in order to ensure the chapter is a safe organizing space for people of all backgrounds. We have implemented a confidential grievance process in the event that any members are subject to harassment, abuse, or harm by another member. In order to learn more about the policy, including how to file a grievance, confidential grievance, you can visit houstondsa.org /about/harassment-grievance-policy. The current grievance officers are Monica and James, and you may request a specific grievance officer to review your grievance if preferred. All right, so for the agenda tonight, we are going to go over the calendar of upcoming events. This also includes a specific update for the Justice for Jalen campaign and an event that's coming up this Saturday, as well as a banner reveal coming very quickly. We'll have some brief committee reports, member requested time, and then the first sort of major work for tonight's meeting is there is going to be discussion over a resolution dealing with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, HGAC, charter amendment, and whether Houston DSA should be part of a coalition that will be participating in signature collection to create this charter amendment and get it on the ballot for voters later this year. We'll have a brief intermission, and then we are going to get into our first sort of in place of a regular breakout sessions as we've had before. We're going to have the first session of our chapter's assessments and perspectives. And this is basically meant to be a lead up leading into our chapter convention that will be held about 2 months from now, on Saturday, March 11th. There are going to be a total of 4 of these assessments and perspective sessions, kind of dealing with sort of broad questions about organizing, about the goals of our organization and what our work should be focused on. That is going to be the focus of these sessions. The first one will be tonight. We'll have a wrap up. We'll sing Solidarity Forever, and then we'll adjourn for drinks and socializing nearby afterwards. All right. So for upcoming events, I'm going to hand it over to Emily, our communications secretary, just to go over the calendar of what is coming up for the chapter.
All right, so as Stephen said, I'm Emily, she, her pronouns, the communications secretary. All right, can y'all hear me online? Probably better now. All right, so yeah, again, I'm Emily, she, her communications. Okay, so we've got a full calendar coming up. Next Saturday, we have 2 events. First in the morning at City Hall, 10 a.m., there's going to be a Justice for Jalen rally. There's more about that on in our newsletter and on their social media about this horrific murder that we need to do something about, do something about HPD, as always. After that, at 5 p.m., we have a movie night at Harlan County. A movie night here about Harlan County, USA. It's going to be a great documentary. Next Wednesday is the labor working group meeting, which is usually the 3rd Wednesday of the month. After that, also the third Thursday is abolition working group. So more of our routine meetings. We have a resolutions and bylaws writing workshop the next week, the weekend of the 21st to the 22nd. Next week, Robert's Rules training also for the convention. And I'd also like to highlight that right after we have that training, there's going to be a national level debate about the vote that some of the national DSA electeds did with regards to the rail strike and how we move forward after that happened as a national organization. So that's also something that we need to pay attention to, even though we aren't in the jurisdiction of the squad. It matters to us. And then finally, there is chapter orientation Wednesday, February 1st. And we just want to let you know that there are going to be more assessments and perspectives for the upcoming convention on March 11th. Okay. Yeah, sorry, we're doing the slides a bit differently, but also just a general reminder that you can sign up to our calendar on HoustonDSA.org. And we hope to see you around in the future. I'm sorry, I've done better in the past, but thank you.
All right. So again, also for members, we do have our weekly steering committee meetings every Monday at 6 p.m. on Zoom. That link is posted in Mattermost, usually the day of. So again, that's open to members to join on that. And then also, again, as Emily was mentioning, you can subscribe to the calendar so that you are keeping up to date on events and meetings. This can include HoustonDSA.org/calendar, also subscribing on your phone. And then you should also be following the national DSA calendar for events like that discussion that's coming up with the National Political Committee, as well as just other trainings or other sort of national level meetings and Zooms that are happening. All right, so I do want to give a brief update on the Justice for Jalen campaign. Again, this Saturday, there is going to be an action, a rally at City Hall, led by the family, led by the parents of Jalen Randall, who was murdered by the Houston police almost a year ago. The chapter has shown support. Chapter members have been out in support of Jalen Randall's family. And so we are encouraged to come and attend. If you have the ability to make signs in advance of Saturday morning to bring out in support of the family and justice for his family, please do so. The chapter has also purchased and paid for the creation of a banner that we will be using on Saturday. And so if we can bring that up here so everyone can see, just bring it in the front here. So it says, no justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, disarm, defund, abolish. Thank you so much. And again, we hope to see you on Saturday. It's going to be a busy day with the support for the rally, attendance at the rally in the morning at 10 a.m. And then right here at the Union Hall at 5 p.m., we'll be having the film screening and social for Harlan County, USA. All right, next is our financial report. Here is Kim, our treasurer.
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Cool. Okay, I'm Kim, she, they. I'm the current treasurer for Houston DSA. So here are kind of the financial updates. So in December, we were able to raise $630. So thank you guys so much for your donations. We only accept member donations. There's no corporate bullshit. So we provide drinks and food for our members at our meetings. So that way that we don't want the finances to be a burden for anyone to participate in our meetings. But what we want to also ask is that those who can afford to, if you could donate a little bit to buy a comrade a drink. So we have a cash jar. We also have the QR code that you can scan. That goes to our action network, which then goes directly to our bank account. So then that offsets costs for everyone to make sure everyone is able to participate. And then right now we have about $10,000 in our checking. We have $2,500 in our savings. So we have in total $12,500. And that it's pretty much all I have. We'll be getting our due shares in February or March for this quarter. So we do get a chunk of change back from national that comes from your national dues. But then you can also donate directly to Houston DSA through our action network. And so all that money comes to us. So you can always, cut your donations to national and give more to us directly. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Kim. And then the last update we have, just in terms of general business and sort of what things that are coming up, is, as I mentioned before, the chapter convention is going to be happening on Saturday, March 11th. It will be a hybrid meeting for both in-person attendance here at the Union Hall, as well as members can join through Zoom to participate. And regarding the calendar for submitting priority resolutions, bylaws changes to our current bylaws, that submission process will begin this Saturday, January 14th. So you will see a post in Mattermost with that form. It will be open for over a month. So from January 14th through Saturday, February 18th. And as mentioned, we're having these perspectives and assessment sessions starting tonight, going through the February general meeting. There'll be still another week beyond that of submissions still being open for bylaws, changes, and resolutions. And as mentioned before on the upcoming events calendar, we are putting together a writing workshop training for members who are interested in putting together priority resolutions or bylaws changes, just to try to make that process as streamlined and easy as possible, and to offer help with that, as well as that Robert's Rules training that's going to be happening 2 weeks from now on Thursday. If you want to be more involved in the planning of the convention, there's a lot of different work and tasks to be done. So if you visit bit.ly/HDA-con, This is a Google form where you can sign up and express, which committee you would want to be involved in with the convention planning. There's rules and overview. There's the resolution, bylaws, writing support. That's the group putting together this training that's going to happen in just over a week. Again, the assessments and perspective session, the first session's tonight, but they still would welcome any help from members who are interested in those later sessions that will happen. And then sort of basic logistics of the convention related to things like accessibility, carpooling, food and drinks, those types of needs that we'll have to take care of ahead of the convention. So again, it's sort of an all hands on deck situation. The more that help out, the better. And again, more representative the convention can be for the membership and leading our chapter forward. Okay. So this next part, we are moving into the motivation and discussion for the Houston-Galveston Area Council City Charter Amendment Coalition. I cannot facilitate this next part of the meeting because I am one of the co-signers of the resolution and would also be the campaign lead if we agree to join this coalition and work with other organizations. But I'm going to turn over to the motivator, or excuse me, let me actually turn it over to the person who is facilitating, co-chair Ricky, and he'll explain a bit more about this next session.
Hey y'all, how y'all doing? I'm Ricky Heeham, fellow co-chair of Stephen. So yeah, this is a very exciting resolution and very exciting to present it. So you can see more about the resolution there at bit.ly/HDSA/HCAC. So we're gonna go ahead and give it over to Victoria, who is the motivator, to explain some of the details of the convention and of the resolution and why we think it's good for the chapter to sign on to this. So Victoria.
Hi there, I'm Victoria, she, her. I'm just going to give a little bit of background about what this resolution is about. So first, what is HGAC? HGAC is the Houston-Galveston Area Council. It's a council of representatives of local government around the Houston area. It represents 13 counties and controls billions of dollars of federal grant money every year. This grant money goes to towards things like transportation, childcare, workforce and community development, flood mitigation, and other infrastructure projects. So it's pretty important for the Houston area. But unfortunately, decision-making is heavily weighed against Harris County and Houston. For example, in the Transportation Policy Council, the TPC, Houston represents 60% of the population, but only 20% of the vote. So no matter how much we pressure our electeds, they can't control what projects get pushed through the HGAC. They can't control how that money is apportioned. So this resolution would kind of push for more equitable representation in the HGAC. All right, so the charter amendment that we're trying to get on the ballot for 2023 with this coalition is going to essentially force HGAC to adopt a proportional voting system. If they don't adopt a proportional voting system, the charter amendment would force Houston to leave the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, which would then either pressure HGAC to reconsider and try to give a more proportional voting system, or Houston would have to entirely rethink how we decide on federal funding. So there are several options, but hopefully the outcome would be that we get more proportional voting for Harris County and Houston. So currently there is a coalition being formed. Other organizations around the Houston area are also voting with their membership this week, whether they want to support this effort. The big effort is going to be in getting signatures. The goal for our coalition is going to be to get 35,000 signatures, although we only need 20,000 to get on the ballot for this year. We expect Houston to throw out several thousand votes, so we want to just kind of overshoot our target by a little bit. So if Houston DSA were to sign on to this resolution, we would be committing to getting 5,000 signatures. And this is going to be honest to God, door knocking. We have to get wet signatures, no digital signatures, nothing like that. And it's all going to be registered Harris County voters. So this is the language for the charter amendment. This is essentially what you'd have people sign on to if you were block walking. I'll let you guys read it, and it should also be on the papers. All right. I'm pretty involved with other organizations that are working on this. So if you have any questions about it, let me know. But I think that's all I have to cover.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for everyone who's worked to put this together. I think we'll give like a minute for people to read over it, and then we're gonna open this up for debate. So give y'all just a little bit of time. All right, y'all. So first, I'm gonna go ahead and open it up. Does anyone has a question or point of question to make about the resolution? Yes, Jerry. Oh, I apologize. Could you come up here and then say it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, if anyone wants to speak or has a question, you'll just come up here and then present it to the audience on Zoom and to everyone here as well.
Yeah, at first glance, this seems sort of outrageous that 4 million of us, or 60% of the population of the Harris County Galveston area, only have 20% of the votes. And I was just wondering how this came to be. I have to admit, I've lived here for 40 years and didn't know about this. So I'm just interested in a little bit of history and how that came to be.
Council has all kinds of representatives, whether it's city council people, or I think even the head of Metro and other organizations are in this council. So I don't know the history, but yeah, it sucks.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a question about the coalition for the campaign. So I'm already familiar with Stop I-45, but do we know what the other community groups are that are joining the coalition?
Yeah, so like I said, all of the different groups are currently still voting. So no one has officially joined the coalition yet, but I think for now it's going to be Stop I-45, Air Alliance Houston, Link Houston. They're in talks with NAACP groups, I believe. And do you remember any of the others?
I think they were gonna do outreach to some elected officials. To
Okay.
see if they would want to take a position on this or.
Mhm. Yeah, so elected officials, and I think also Young Democrats of Houston or something like that.
Yeah, I think there was a young Democratic.
Mhm.
There was representation.
Yeah, so mostly left-leaning Houston groups, I guess.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name is Serena, she, they. I know I am a co-signer of this, but I do have a question regarding the second be it further resolved clause, second to last. And specifically the sentence or the phrase that says, and where per the agreement with the coalition, our campaign's messaging will be restricted to themes such as democracy and open government with quote unquote political issues set aside. I just want to get some clarification as to what that means for what our campaign materials will look like. And if that will bar us from talking about specifically how democracy relates to socialism in our material.
So and again, I'm just speaking also just because I've been on some of these calls with the coalition. I know that a lot of the Stop Text Dot folks are basically kind of taking the lead in terms of organizing initial materials, the verification of the signatures that all different orgs are gathering, like having to actually verify that those are registered Houston voters. The language there, even though there will be sort of a basic placard that they print up and create, my understanding is that we still would be able to generate our own materials or flyers that we wanted to. I think some of that wording there is also kind of similar to what had been done on previous charter amendment campaigns. For example, the ongoing strong mayor system, where it wasn't just members of Houston DSA, but you had organizations that probably normally would not work with Houston DSA, but also wanted to limit the mayor's power and increase that agenda power for council members. So I think, there is still kind of an idea that maybe this coalition could grab groups that don't normally work with maybe progressive or left-leaning groups, but that's not a guarantee. As previously said, so far it is mostly groups focused on transportation and environmental issues that are plugged into this. But I guess that's sort of my answer, that language carried over from like a similar charter amendment coalition. Yeah.
Hey y'all, Madeline Pelzel, she, they. I just had a brief, I'm also a co-signer, had a brief answer to Jerry's question. It's really complicated, like all these kinds of things, but it's like Victoria mentioned, this is our metropolitan planning organization, and that's a kind of jargony type situation that was formed all across the country in the 70s. And it was a time in the area when the population sort of distribution was a lot more balanced. And I mean, there were still a lot more people in the city of Houston and Harris County than there were in the other counties at that time. But that was also when Metro was forming. And to my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, but in what I've gathered, to get Metro, the city and the county had to, they had to concede some things, and to get Metro funded by all of the Metro area, they basically agreed to the voting structure. This was also, during a time of white flight, and there was a lot of other implications for why people had different interests in how the voting structure was set up. But this is, coming from the 70s and that time in Houston, and the concessions, from what I've gathered, were made so that we would have Metro.
So I was just wondering how exactly the members that make up the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the governing board, get selected or appointed there or elected there. Does it really get there, and how in the first place? What is the mechanism by which the people who make up the governing board council for the Metropolitan Planning Organization get to that place in the first place? Because the reason why is because I've certainly never seen this put up on a ballot before. So the mechanism by which they get there in the first place doesn't seem to be democratic either. Not just like the proportional seating allocation, but just how they get there.
So like I said before, most of the members that make up the board are city council people who are elected. I'm not sure how those specific people get chosen. If anyone else in the room knows, I think they're appointed, but yeah, so the mayor appoints which city council members get on the board. And then it's also the heads of different organizations, like Metro has someone representing their other things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Would it be better to shift this forward from the mayor, to the council appointing these people?
I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I would kind of point out just sort of the mechanics of what this is essentially saying that if Houston voters in November of this year say we're not going to be part of this council anymore because of this unproportional representation, it becomes an issue of, yes, either they have to reorganize how it's done, they have to, the other members, the other communities that are represented here outside of Houston, Harris County, basically have to agree to some type of reorganization. And again, whether or not that means people would be elected or appointed, it is, again, sort of it is a governing body that, yeah, probably most Houstonians know nothing about or hear nothing about, because it really isn't in people's minds the same way that council members or the mayor is. What kind of new system would be put in place, assuming this is successful? I'm not sure either, but as the system currently works, for all of our population increases and all of our transportation needs that we have as a city, we really don't have representative power on this body to make those decisions. So we have people in outlying counties, in exurbs, that are basically telling us how we're going to spend this money, or how this federal money for our highways, for our road construction projects, how this is going to be spent. And we don't get much say, or we have very little say in how that's being done, which is untenable and needs to be changed.
All right, I was gonna go ahead and make a motion to open this up to debate. So if anyone would like to speak for or against, you can go ahead and come up here to the stage and yeah. If there, got one person, okay. No, go ahead. You can go ahead and speak.
Hey y'all, I'm DA, he, him. I'm gonna vote, I suggest people voting for this because, basically this is one of the big roadblocks to not only Houston having a proportionate say in its own sort of municipal and broader transport and transportation future, but on the other hand, to address what was just discussed, if it doesn't pass, if Houston says, no, we're not doing this, and then the rest of the other entities involved can't figure out what to do, then that puts all of this I-45 stuff basically dead in its tracks, at least for 2 or 3 years. And if you're not familiar with the scope of what's happening with the I-45 project, it's, to put it bluntly, it's a clusterfuck, and it's going to screw so many people who don't deserve to be screwed. Nobody does, but whatever. And it's, at the very least, if this doesn't turn out to be an immediately unqualified good, it will at least put the brakes on something that's a very unqualified bad. So I think that we should definitely support this. It's, as far as chapter work goes, pretty minimal effort on our part. We can go out and knock doors for a few months. It's not that big of a deal. And it's just something that will also help build ties with other groups within the community that deserve our support, and will help sort of cement our place in the greater Houston landscape of progressive activism, and give us a chance to talk to people about socialism as well. So there you have it.
All right. Thank you very much, DA. Before you come up, will you be speaking against, or, okay, do you still want to speak for, or would you prefer we move this to question to vote on? All right. You can if you would prefer. Yeah, because we want to kind of keep this measured. So does anyone want to speak against? No. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Hector. Him, just play devil's advocate. So if it says here that we will be using $1,000 from the chapter's funds, that's 10% of our current checking account balance. My concern before we went up for vote was, if the goal is the signatures, it says, you stated previously, it would be, take a couple of months for us to gather the signatures. My concern is how realistic is it for us to achieve the signature goal? And if it's going to impact our goals from other goals of the chapter that are more achievable.
All right, any four or other four?
Well, I can kind of respond maybe a little bit directly to that. Does this? Oh, there we go. In terms of the way that this impacts the rest of our goals, I think that's really valid. I think this is kind of a short burst effort, right? We have to get the signatures pretty quickly. The ballot is coming up this year. And talking to people and going and knocking on their doors for something that's not actually like an electoral thing is a much more pleasant experience than you might find knocking electorally. And it gives us a chance to really talk to a lot of people in a way that's not just specifically around an election. I mean, this is around voting, but it's not around a candidate, right? And it really allows us, I think, a chance to talk to people who we might not usually knock on their doors, right? Because we're not only going to be knocking on the doors that Van gives us who are certain types of voters. And it gives us a chance to build inroads with them and talk to them about these issues like flooding. I mean, the HDAC doesn't just control transportation dollars. And it's not just the I-45 fight. TxDOT's trying to widen every single highway in our area because they're having a vengeance against us at the moment. They're having meetings next week about north of Beltway 8, right? I-45 project currently is just south of Beltway 8, but they're expanding it even further. And so it's all the highways, all the roads, it's flooding, workforce development, all types of things. But more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to knock on a ton of doors this summer, this spring, when it's nice out, and meet a lot of people who we can bring into our movement. So I think we should vote for this. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to change the way that our region gets funded and our region works. And it gives us more chances after we win this to keep fighting and keep getting the money more distributed to the projects that we want.
All right, thank you very much.
Did I also answer that?
Yes, go ahead, but just reminder that we are on a bit of a time crunch.
Okay, obviously I'm for this, but I'm just going to respond to that point about the $1,000 that would be approved, maybe like for flyers or for other campaign needs. We don't have to spend up to that full amount. And then also there is another clause following that talks about we would have community events or outreach, which would include fundraising efforts. Again, always we encourage people to donate to the chapter for that to go into our general checking account to ensure that we're replenishing funds that are going out for things like a banner for racial justice and abolition efforts, or for this project or this campaign that's specifically around, again, transportation, flooding needs and concerns.
Thank you very much.
All right, I would like to go ahead and make a suggestion. Would anyone like? We have another person?
All right, there was a request to read some of the statements from the chat. Jane had mentioned our chapter's money shouldn't be just to sit in the bank and make us feel financially secure. It should be spent on organizing and opportunities to train members through practice. And I think Paul had something underneath. Oh, all right, we got a motion to move to call the question. So I second.
Yeah, so move to call the question, just to clarify, is we're gonna bring it to an immediate vote, no more amendments, no more debate, and it will go ahead and be settled. So accept the move to call the question. Second? Second. All right. In that case, let's do it. Right. Right, so we're gonna take an immediate vote to end debates, amendments. All in favor, second? Raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? All right. All right, well, thank you very much. We're gonna go ahead and move this to a vote, and we're gonna do it through the typical OPA voting, I believe, electronic voting. All right, we're just gonna go ahead and do the regular OPA voting, so no vote by acclamation. Apologies for that, some rules confusion. Thank y'all for bearing with us. So for the OPA voting, Jose, do you want to explain the details?
Okay, greetings, comrades. Jose, he, him pronouns. If you're a member in good standing, that means that you paid your dues to DSA. You will receive an email today. It's called OPA voting. You will have options of yes or no, yes, abstain. Voting will close tomorrow at 12 p.m. So make sure you cast your ballots. If for some reason I have missed you, I'm not perfect, please make sure to email at info@houstondsa.org. I'll be monitoring this tonight and tomorrow. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to vote if you can, okay? So thanks.
All right, thank y'all very much for being with us on that, y'all. As soon as you have a question. Yes, everyone will be voting through upper vote. Members in good standing, as mentioned, and you'll receive a ballot. So again, apologies. So there's some of the details there. One general meeting as a DSA member, but that'll be vetted. So we're gonna go ahead and go to intermission. So it's gonna be a 10-minute break. We'll return here for the second half, which is the perspective and assessment session. So once again, thank y'all very much, and go ahead and take these 10 minutes.
Open for us? Is it ready? All right, welcome back from the intermission. I hope everyone got something to drink. We're going to be moving into our first perspectives and assessment session. So again, I'm going to turn that over to our co-chair, Ricky, to lead that and explain how that will work.
Thank y'all. Okay, so once again, welcome to the second half here. So just to give a quick introduction into what the hell this assessments and perspectives thing is, it is part, as mentioned, of the overall convention planning. We have a committee that works on this, and so for this one, we wanted to kind of start off. The main reason is to motivate an internal sort of political discussion and get direct member engagement, not online, but in person, face to face, talking about the sort of issues that we're gonna have to deal with as a socialist organization, as a member of the, just the broader left, what it is, what that means. Because leading up to this convention, we're gonna make a lot of decisions. It'll be the first one we've had, so it's kind of gonna set the precedent going forward. What is it that we want out of this chapter? What is it that we want just as a movement, right? In general, these are harder questions that we have to, of course, not 100% resolved. They're always going to be, or resolved. They're always going to be somewhat open, but we need to engage with them. And we don't want it to just be the people who are most online or most vocal. We want it to be as many people as possible, to have as much democratic input as possible. So come convention, the stuff that we vote on will not just be presented by someone unknown, but by a comrade that you've discussed and engaged with, and that you've actually maybe sat down and maybe critiqued or encouraged with their resolution or their bylaws change. So that's what we're going to go ahead and start with. And we're going to start at the broadest scope possible. Here's an outline here, the introduction of how it's going to work. So I'm going to give a short presentation to set the kind of framing for the discussions, and then we'll go into breakout groups. You should have plenty of time to talk, like 20 minutes. And then you'll have one person, we'll have a facilitator, and the facilitators have already been designated. When we get to that, we'll sort that out. We'll have one person who's going to take notes because we want to go back and review them. And then finally, we're going to have one person from each of the groups to come back and give a sort of report over what it is that y'all discussed. And then we're going to go back one more time into the groups. And there's a final set of questions. And we're just going to kind of, at that point, we'll send it off, and it's, it's booze. So let's see. Then we party. So to start off, I wanted, again, to put this at the broadest scope possible. And I'll spend about 10 minutes here, not too long. So I'll time myself. The international scope, so on a worldwide. So to me, although these aren't distinct categories, we're currently facing, these three main pillars, which is the ecological, political, and economic crises now of the 21st century. These are the main things that humanity has, broadly has to contend with. But, as members of the left, who have a sort of positive vision for the future that we want to present and we want to bring forth, it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that happens and not some of the alternatives, right? There are many ways this could go, and we want to make sure that it goes the way that we envision it, because I think we have something to offer. So the first is the issue of the ecology, and the biggest one, which is climate change. So I think we're all aware, and none of us are too skeptical about the impact of climate change that, is becoming ever more apparent as the days go by. It's been an increase in extreme weather just this last year. I forget, we're in 2023 now, but we've had floods and heat waves in Pakistan that have displaced millions of people that still haven't been addressed. Not to mention there was floods and a heat wave in Europe that affected them extremely heavily. In the US itself, we had a hurricane that hit Florida that was, very extreme. I mean, here in Houston, Harvey devastated a lot of communities near us. And, obviously many more that I can't exactly list here, because there's a lot of maybe less noticed, but still felt disasters that are just not accounted for because they don't exactly reach our news cycle. This climate change not only, affects us in, this extreme, like visceral way, but also through unpredictable disruptions on food systems and crops, of which, by chance we are, or not by chance, but by design, we are the least affected by, being as we are in the first world. We are, the wealthiest country in the world. But we cannot say the same for those countries of the periphery in the third world who have been exploited and oppressed, who this will affect most drastically. And that's a broader point, that the people who are most responsible for this, who have caused the most amount of emissions, who have, caused the most amount, the buildup of industry, will not be the ones most affected. And in fact, this will be disproportionately felt by those who have already suffered and will continue to suffer. We're currently on track to a over 2-degree increase. I checked before this meeting. I think it's about 2.7 worldwide increase in global temperature, which, I would encourage y'all to look up the specific effects of which, but they are extremely disastrous. But one that I want to highlight is how this will, obviously we know about the sea levels, we know about the melting of the Arctic, but the real human cost, which is this will fuel a refugee crisis, unlike the likes we've ever seen probably in history. I think y'all all remember about almost 8 years ago, almost a decade ago, when there was the refugee crisis in Europe in 2015, a lot of people from Syria, and you saw the sort of political and social backlash that affected in Europe, and how that fueled a sort of right-wing shift and sort of hate and violence. And that will not end. And in fact, I can expect the sort of violence and dehumanization that we see even along our own border, obviously, most obviously at our own border, will become even more visceral, even more hard to ignore. The caging and killing of humans will not end. It will increase economic and political tensions. And I put this in there because I do think it's relevant, but the COVID-19 pandemic cannot be separated from our relationship with our ecology, our practices in farming, of industrial farming. And even that itself is something that I think is brought about and systemically constructed by capitalism and leads to this sort of, pandemics and of course the horrible response to it. This leads into the second sort of sphere, which is the global recession and economic instability. So right now we are sort of feeling tipping into a global recession, and we felt it, in the US with the rise of inflation. But once again, this is not something that affects us actually most intensely. It's something that affects those of the periphery and the third world and those exploited. I think just recently, again, as I was researching for this, the World Bank even, is not a great institution by any means, but they admitted themselves that there seems to be tipping into a global recession. And this, this goes into the second point, which is the constant decrease of capitalism's rate of profit, something proposed by Marx that, although if you're not familiar, basically posits that it is harder as technology advances and things get automated for capital to extract surplus labor from humans because there's less to extract. The more things get automated, technology advances. And this is inescapable, as much as there have been setbacks or at least sort of things that will mitigate this rate of profit decrease. It is inescapable and it continues to be felt. And all of these economic instabilities that we see also with the supply chain issues that we've seen in the past year are also exacerbated by the the ecological and political crises that are ongoing. Speaking of political instability, we see the weakening of US hegemony, the military dominance of the US, which is able to maintain sort of global order of capitalism, make it orderly, of course, not accounting for all of the immiseration that it causes, but at the very least, there was some sort of overarching political stability. But we've seen that breaking up as the US begins to decline. The war in Ukraine, multipolarization, China on the rise. Whatever your opinions on this, I think that is something that we should contend with in our position here in the US. We've seen massive upheavals, for example, in Sri Lanka, where they literally stormed the presidential palace, swam in it. There's a country that went bankrupt. And I should note, Sri Lanka was not a poor country relative to the region. It was like a middle income country. So this is not something that, just devastated this, extremely poor country. We saw, recently in Brazil, that fiasco, Ukraine again, more broadly, and in Peru, where we have some comrades from there, where there's extreme violence and political instability going on. Just the rise of far-right reactionary groups and governments worldwide, particularly in the West and Europe. On a positive note, and I include this just personally, the somewhat leftward shift in Latin America, although this also is hampered and constrained by broader conditions, the fact that they are, broadly exploited, and you can only go so far when you are sort of second ring there. So all of this, going over all of this, I have to ask the question, how does the left fit in into all this? And I want y'all to, sit with that, and we'll kind of go back to that in the questions. But, with all this going on, what can we do? What is the answer? And not just nationally, but we say the left. I personally mean the socialist left, but I'm not going to, insinuate on your personal political persuasions. But what is it that we can, the left broadly can do to combat all this? So move on to the national scope. And y'all a bit more familiar on this, so I won't spend too much time. Well, we have the rise of the far right and reactionary agitation here at home, particularly here in Texas. Rise in homophobia, transphobia, broadly against the LGBTQ community, anti-immigrant sentiment that I can't expect will decrease anytime soon, and many others that I didn't list here. But if y'all, I'm sure y'all have plenty of others, and y'all will have an opportunity to express this. An increase in political polarization, but a lack of meaningful political influence to increase with that. Not really. The vast majority of people, despite their increasing sort of solidification or even radicalization of their views, still have about the same political effect or engagement as ever. They don't really have too much of power to affect the systems that dominate them. There's an ever increasing militarization. Obviously, every year the military budget increases without fault. And abroad and domestically, obviously, we've seen the increased militarization of our own police force, our own internal sort of oppression. There's a decreasing standard of living for the vast majority of working class people in America. This is despite, of course, the increased wealth accumulation of those 1% and the capitalist class. There is an increase in public awareness and support for labor agitation, but union density is still at very low rates. I think if y'all would notice, it was actually a steady increase up until COVID-19, and that got dashed because of the pandemic. Despite the fact, and this is a positive, there are several high-profile labor fights. Amazon being one that is very encouraging. Starbucks that we've been personally involved in. That's been wonderful. Even just personally being involved with that and being involved with those people, and helping them to, show solidarity as workers. And obviously the railroad fights that, although not entirely favorable situation or outcome, happened nonetheless, and it's something that was unprecedented up to this point. So the final question is to leave here at the national scope is, how do the international issues affect what happens nationally, and vice versa, being that we are at the sort of center or the most powerful, country in the world? What is it that what we do here, how does that affect sort of the broader national current or international currents? And then again, where does the left fit into this scope, this national scope? How can we respond broadly to the sort of trends that we see here at home? And so I pose all these questions, and obviously this is sort of my limited analysis and coverage of what's going on. Obviously, you'll have your own personal maybe focuses. And so I wanted to bring that to the breakout groups, where I kind of structured it so that the facilitators will go into two phases, sort of first focusing on international questions and the national questions that y'all will discuss. But I'll leave it up to their discretion. But I do want, to emphasize for y'all, give y'all the opportunity. Are there other pressing questions that were not mentioned, that I mentioned, that need to be dealt with, that y'all would want to bring up? What is the position of the left on a world scale? As we mentioned, do we have the capacity to take on these issues? If there was an international left movement, what issues should take priority? Don't just, not just what I say, but what is it that y'all personally want to see tackled? What would that even look like? And again, I want y'all to, be radical about this. Like, go crazy. Like, don't think that something is impossible or that's defeating. Y'all need to be as bold as possible. And then do the same on the national scale. Again, what happens nationally and how does that affect vice versa? The position, the capacity. And if there was a national left movement, a mass movement, and again, I want y'all to use your imagination and be bold. What issues should take priority and why, and what would that look like? And then finally, I think this is the most important thing to end off on. What is the end goal for left politics nationally and worldwide? What kind of world do we ultimately want to create? What are we aiming for? I think that sort of guiding principle and that vision will affect a lot of the resolutions and bylaws that we're going to put forward, reflect the direction of the chapter, and will help to, I think, guide the discussion and, the chapter going forward. So I'll go ahead and leave it to the facilitators. If y'all can raise your hands. I'm actually a facilitator myself. I'm going to break out into 6 groups. So organize the chairs as y'all can. I think there should be about 7 people to each group if we break out into 6. And yeah, y'all go ahead. We'll start this discussion.
What just helps build it towards a more safe society, addressing the basic needs of people related to healthcare and housing and food and water, education. How do we sort of increase more democratic input and decision making for all? And some of this got into even kind of the wonky details of changing the nature and structure of our governmental systems, whether that's public financing for campaigns, actual ethics reform with real teeth, and even just thinking about the benefits that would come from maybe a parliamentary system and more proportional representation in our institutions to have more responsive representatives, elected representatives in our government.
All right, thank you very much. So we got three more groups, minute each. We got Will, come on up.
All right, we'll try to keep this brief, folks. So our group really focused on sort of two sort of areas of discussion, one of which is what do we want to do? What do we feel like we should be doing more of? The second one was how do we get there? So the first thing was really a lot of things that our people already talked about here, but the theme was really what can we do that sort of makes us collectively feel a responsibility for each other? Things like healthcare, things like education, things like transportation. All of these are things that right now keep us divided. So how do we pull people together on these sorts of threads? And that's what we totally talked about as our policy priorities and our goals, because those are things that are most lacking for people in our society, including many of us here in this room. And so how do we do that? It's through the actions that we perform that we're already doing right now, which is labor organizing, which are things like our electoral campaigns that hopefully focus on candidates we find that are acceptable or good for us as far as bringing these parties to the table. So it was really a thought about what we can do to amplify the work we're doing now, but also how we can build in sort of talking about internationalism, our international city connections with each other and communities that we're not currently familiar with. And so yeah, really sort of outreach to communities, making sure that we not only are together in terms of what we think, but also that we're reflective of the demographics of our very diverse city as well. So how can we do that on a more robust basis? And so that's kind of where we were as far as focusing on our priorities, but also how we get there. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Will. Okay, we got that group. Thank you, Karitz. Yeah, about a minute each because we got to get out of here.
So we didn't have that much time, so we only had 2 minutes. So the end goal would be basically to make a better world where decency for human life and for everybody, where everybody's rights are respected. To quote Bertrand Russell in this, the good life is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge, and in that pursuit of knowledge is where we gain the freedom to understand how we want to liberate ourselves. And in that understanding of liberating ourselves, we're going to identify structures of authority that are of course illegitimate, and we can cite for that racial and economic injustices, reversing budget for military to healthcare and education, eliminating private property, quite radical per se, even more so in capitalist US of A, where it's almost intrinsic to our culture. Don't have this mentality proper of the capitalist system to just seek pursuit material wealth, but actually have our values in mind when talking about how we want to live together as people, have everyone's physical needs met, and undoing the harm created by this brutal economic system known as neoliberalism, which only has exacerbated worse conditions of life for everybody around the world, has polluted the environment, creates this vitriolic sentiment of hold on guys, I can't remember the word in English, neglects sort of people's basic needs, and in general just creates harm and affects pretty much everybody. So end goals, I guess, environment, fight against neoliberalism, and I guess as US citizens, as citizens of this country, the most powerful one on earth, I guess a very fierce and a firm anti-imperialist stance. That would be it.
Was there another group or? Okay. I'm sorry if we didn't get a chance. Okay. All right. Come on out. Yeah, come on out. I apologize, y'all.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Adam Oganowski. I was talking to our friends here on Zoom. Mostly kind of talk about the issue of priorities, but of course started with reminding us that worldwide, the left's real power is the control of our labor. That is our point of leverage. That kind of allows us to make all of our further demands happen. Without that is our one means of power, and getting the world over to begin to leverage that is really how we start things moving. Of course, also discussed climate as a major both domestic and international priority, and both in the sense that it is affecting everybody, and that in order to effectively respond to it, there needs to be a coordinated response worldwide. And that includes making sure that we are not exploiting the global south in order to continue to develop green technologies here, lithium mining and things of this nature, the exploitative nature required to get a lot of the green technologies that we require, that we talk about. So making sure that we come up with solutions that do not continue that kind of power balance. Confronting corporate global hegemony as a whole is a big piece of how we get to where we want to go. Talking about, and another big point that we hit was just democracy in the workplace, both on a small and large scale, right? That we have these lovely institutions now that we call labor unions, that in large part are advocating for all these great things, including better benefits, better pay, better safety, all better schedules, all these kinds of things. And in part, and what we hope to maybe leverage more of is not just looking for those things, but to also steer the institutions themselves, right? Saying that, hey, this labor that we're doing, this work that we're doing is harming the world, and we're going to withhold our labor in order to make sure that not just our workplace, but the world as a whole is a better place, and coordinating those efforts. So that is kind of a quick summary. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thank y'all very much for engaging with this. I don't want to hold y'all too much more. The final question: how can we take the issues discussed and attempt to address them within our chapter? What are the most important campaigns or issues we should fight for in the greater Houston area? How do we mobilize people to fight for these issues? What do we need to do within this chapter to be able to equip ourselves and others to meet these challenges? And those are some examples. So we didn't get time to address these questions, but that's okay, because this is just the first of 4 sessions that we're going to be doing. We'll have another one at the next general meeting, but there will be basically 4. So the schedule is this one, another one in between the next general, another one at the next general, and then one more after that one. So we're the idea is to kind of get down to these like basics, and for y'all to be thinking about this and engaging with each other, kind of like the discussions we had, but outside, and coming up with like actual resolutions. We'll have trainings on those that we're facilitating. If you want to interested in learning how to write a resolution, amendments to bylaws. So maybe we can structure this chapter differently. So yeah, it's just to get you thinking and leading up to the convention where these kind of larger questions are going to have to be addressed. So thank y'all very much. And it's boost time. I think we're going to close off, Stephen. Yeah, by the way, yeah, Workers of the World Unite. I think you're going to close off the meeting.
All right. Thank you again to everybody for all your contributions, to Ricky and Ben and Will and others. And again, you can be involved in that committee, as I mentioned, get connected on Mattermost and our comms there. Do want to briefly just have a brief announcement here from Kirsten, and also just give a hand to Kirsten and Dave. They've been setting up all of our new tech that we've been using for tonight's meeting. So hopefully that's going good for our Zoom attendees as well. We always want to make the meeting as accessible as possible. But Kirsten, you just had a brief announcement.
Talking. Most of you know I work at the Fine Arts Museum, and sometimes they do shows that are relevant to DSA. And we did a tour of this show right before Christmas, and we recorded the tour, so that's going to get edited when I have a free day in a few years. But if you haven't seen the show yet, it's the Gordon Parks photography show. He's an amazing photographer, big deal. Many years ago, he died in the last 20 years at some point. It's on Stokely Carmichael though, and the summer and year when he was traveling in the South and in LA and ended up here right before he quit everything, right when the TSU riots happened and whatnot. So go see it if you haven't seen it yet. It's at the Fine Arts Museum over in Museum District. And the last day is Monday, Martin Luther King Day. So today was free day, so you're gonna probably have to pay. Or if you can find my contact info, we might work something out. But try and get over there. They're open Monday.
All right. Thank you so much, Kirsten. So again, if you're not currently a member of Houston DSA, why aren't you? Please visit DSA USA.org/join. Complete that registration process. If there's a funding issue or concern, you can also reach out to us at our email, info@houstondsa.org, and we can connect you on any sort of dues waivers or other ways to help that not be a barrier, but get you in the chapter. Again, join Mattermost. So when you have joined, or if you've been disconnected from Mattermost recently, if you forward that membership confirmation email to info@houstondsa.org, we can get you plugged in there. Again, that's where a lot of the sort of online organizing in between our meetings and events that we have occurs. So it's important to be plugged in there. Socialist cash fights capitalist trash. So again, as Kim mentioned, any sort of donation that you can make or funds that you have to give to support organizing efforts, please do so. HoustonDSA.org/donate. And we are going to be wrapping up. So stick around afterwards, buy a comrade a drink. We have that donation jar over there. We'll have an open tab for an hour at Bohemios. That's where we're heading very quickly here. They're going to be open till 11. And we're going to close out with Solidarity Forever. So please sign up so you don't have to listen to me sing. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there could be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. And what was on earth is weaker than the people's of one, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union that makes us strong.